Welcome back to another episode of A Gift from Adversity. My name is Juri. I'm your host. Thank you very much for tuning in. Today, we are recording episode 77. Before I introduce my guest, I want to introduce my book, A Gift from Adversity, which is the same title as this podcast, A Gift from Adversity. The subtitle is Overcoming Sexual Abuse, Domestic Violence, Bullying, and Homelessness. And after I experienced all of this, I decided to publish and share my story. But even after I decided to start a podcast to share, to create a platform to talk about adversity, but not only that, tools that people use to overcome, and a gift that came from it. And really, the purpose behind is so that we can really normalize difficult conversations and share our tools for not only us, but for our next generations to come. So today we have a guest all the way from Italy. Hi, Heather. Thank you so much for coming into A Gift from Adversity today.
Hi, Juri. Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. So, Heather, can you please introduce our audience who you are, what you do, your website, and social media handles?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm Heather Emerson-Smith. I own the business WTF Positive Parenting. So I'm a parenting coach. I really help families learn how to understand, how to listen to each other, and really connect with each other. I know a lot of parents are worried about, are my kids doing the right things? They seem really anxious. They seem really stressed. How do we work through all of this? And so I help with a lot of that. So you can find me on Instagram at WTF Positive Parenting. And that's also my website, WTFpositiveparenting.com.
Great. Thank you so much, Heather. And then you said you are originally from America. Where are you originally from?
Yeah, so I'm originally from Colorado in America, and then my husband works overseas. So we're living in Italy right now.
So how is Italy life?
It's okay. So the first 6 months were both like the most thrilling and the most strange months of my life. It was really, like if you're moving, I mean, even if you're moving to another state, right, you're still getting used to what grocery stores are there. But now we're getting used to, okay, grocery stores, but in another language, and what brands do we like? And so it's been a lot of fun. But of course, there's challenges anytime you move, anytime you go somewhere big.
Yes, absolutely. I love Italy. I went there twice. Once was a conference that I had through my nonprofit work, Genuine Voices, and then once was to visit my best friend who was studying at the Bologna University.
I love it. I love it. I love it.
Good. All right, so Heather, so let's dive into our first question. So, what was your adversity?
Yeah, so on August 2nd, 2018, I got a call from my dad saying, Heather, your brother. And I was like, what about him? Is he okay? Is everything? And it was, no, your brother, he's gone. And so I found out that day that my brother had been murdered. So that was heavy. That was a lot. He's my younger brother. He's about 2 years younger than me. And it was just, we were in our mid 20s at the time, right? And so just to hear that, it was so unexpected, right? You hear of accidents, a car accident, of course, anything like that, but you don't expect murder, right? Especially when there's no connection, it was just wrong place, wrong time, unfortunately. So, dealt with my brother. We were in another state at the time. So then we had to deal with, okay, we need to go back. We need to go work through his estate. We need to go work through, which at 25, wasn't a lot, but it was still all of these different things never had thought about, death seems, at least in my experience, felt so far away. in my mid-20s, right? It felt like something that happens like, oh, you're older and that's when you start thinking about it. So for me to all of a sudden have to face, face a lot of this reality, it was just. And then of course there's, grieving for my brother. It was holding a lot of space for my parents. It was, I have young kids. It was, how do I begin to have this conversation, yeah, so it's a big.
So you said August 2nd, 2018.
August 2nd, 2018. Yes. Yep.
So how old were you, and then how old was your brother?
My brother, oh my goodness. So 2018, I was about 27, 28. And then my younger brother was 25, almost 26.
Wow. Very, very young.
Very young, very unexpected.
So, pre-interview that you kind of mentioned about the domestic violence part of it, would you
Yes.
share how he was martyred, if you don't mind?
Yes. Yeah. So at the time he was living with his girlfriend. He was right in between apartments. So he was staying with her just for a little time before he moved into his new apartment. And his current girlfriend had an ex-husband. And so this ex-husband believed that he was told by a divine being that it was his responsibility to end the life of his ex-wife. And so my brother was there at the time, and initially the ex-husband came with a sword, like a machete, and they were able to, fight him off, and they called the police, and there was a big ordeal. The police left several hours later after filing a police report, everything that happened, and then they weren't ever able to find the ex-husband, and then the ex-husband came back later that day, but this time he came back with a gun. And so at that point, he shot my brother. He also shot the young lady, his ex-wife. She survived. And then there was one other young lady in the house, and she was hiding at the time. And so after that, he left. And then we found out later that he committed suicide.
Oh,
Yeah. Quite. It was just, and then you have to think, like, if he hadn't been there, would he still have the emotional burden of his girlfriend, having been murdered? And then you just think about, like, just all the different could haves, like, what could have happened? What if things were just slightly different? What if the police had stayed longer? What if they had found him? Just all of that runs through your head.
and how close were you with your brother?
Yeah, so we were very close growing up. At that point, I was married, I had 2 kids, we were living in another state, so we talked, but it's like there was still, of course, distance, right? We lived in different states. I talked to him, and we always saw each other when I came back to visit. So we were close. We were very close, but it wasn't a. We did talk every day. You know what I mean? So it was a very typical sibling relationship of, hey, how are you? Good, okay. And then I'm a mom, I have 2 kids, I have a husband, and I was very, I was busy. So we were close, but not every day talking close. Yeah.
And did you have any like warning sign about this
No.
relationship that he had, and then extension to the danger of like red flag or anything?
Yeah, no, not at all. And in fact, we really liked this young lady. We're still Facebook friends. Like, there's no like hard feelings here. There's no there's no blame. There's no blame, right? Like, you can't control things like that happen at all, right? That's not within our ability to. And so No, there wasn't. There was no indication of, oh, this isn't something, or this isn't someone he should be with, right? So you can't, we didn't know.
So your brother, like first time when the police came, like I can't believe that he came with the sword. And I don't understand how the police did not arrest him right away and then put
Yeah.
him away.
Right. And that's where we have, like, I have a really hard time because one, I heard the story secondhand, so I wasn't there. And two, we do not understand why the police made the decisions that they made, right? We don't understand why they weren't given and taken to somewhere else. We don't understand. I believe they were looking for him, but they couldn't find the sex husband. But I'm like, but then there's a lot of the questions of, well, why didn't the police stay closer? If they knew there was violence happening, there's just a lot of what ifs, and there's a lot of whys, and there's a lot of frustration there,
It's just so crazy that sometimes this violence obviously is very sudden and then unexpected, and the things can get very escalated, and I've experienced that myself. And one moment that you think the perpetrator is taking a break, but you don't know that they're planning something bigger.
Right.
And like say in Japan, like for instance, like we have earthquake drills, and then the first shake that we hide under the desk at school drill, and then the bigger one comes, so we actually escape in between. But in domestic violence situations and some tragic event like this, I've heard. I'm a journalist, and I've covered many stories and heard many stories that it seems like there's a cycle that people miss the red flag, and then you just don't know how these crazy people can escalate suddenly and then burst into this rage and action.
Right.
And yes, so first of all, I'm very deeply sorry for the loss of your brother, and I'm really grateful that you are here with us and sharing this story, because you are not, unfortunately, the first person to share this information about losing the loved one to a domestic violence.
Yeah, unfortunately. Yeah.
So after your brother's death, it's been about 4 years.
Yes, it's been about 4 years now. Yeah.
How is your mental health? How is your household situation after his death?
Yeah. So there was a long time where, of course, there's grief, right? And for me, a lot of grief really showed up in the loss of what could be, right? There was a lot of, I wish I could text and I can't. There's a lot of, I wish we could have seen, I wish we could have seen him get married. I wish we could have seen him have kids. I wish we could have seen what the rest of his life looks like. So there's, for me, was a lot of the loss of what could be, which I found very interesting. Of course, I miss just talking to him, right? You just miss sending a quick text. My son reminds me so much of my brother, like, and I just so bad wish I could be like, guess what, your nephew did today, and I can't, and that was really hard. I think of all the things, that's the hardest part. But grief is, I think I faced my journey in kind of a different way, of where instead of saying, no, grief, you can't be here, it was a lot of, okay, turn around and let's face this head on and let's feel through this, right? And so for me, it's been, my mental health has been a lot stronger than I thought it would be. I did work with a therapist for 6 months. I worked really hard, and I told him from the beginning, like, I don't want to shy away from this. I don't want to run from this. I don't want to avoid this. Like, I told him, I remember telling my therapist at one point, I was like, this is something that I was given to carry, whether I wanted it or not, and so how do I carry this well? How do I hold this emotion? And so, mental health grief has been a lot about accepting that I can't change what happened, and wondering what if doesn't help me in any way at all. Right? You wonder what if, but it's not going to, me sitting and going all the different scenarios doesn't change what happened. So there was just a lot of acceptance, a lot of really coming to terms just with all of it.
So we're going to talk more about the tools that you use to overcome part of it. But before we move on to the second question, I want to ask a little bit about today. I know you got a phone call and then you kind of briefly mentioned that you have to deal with a lot. And the people who's never experienced the sudden death of the family member like that, and then the phone call, and then the weight of that phone call, the disbelief, and
a lot of disbelief.
And then your mental stage and everything. How do you recall that specific moment, like when you got a phone call and then got explanation actually how he passed?
Yeah. So I got the phone call from my dad. And it was, my dad's crying, and I think I've seen my dad cry once, so I'm knowing, okay, this is something big has happened. Right. And so I'm listening to my dad explain, your brother's gone, something happened. He was killed, and I'm going, whoa. And then I remember hanging up. I remember calling my husband, like yelling, like, Zach, please, like, come here. And he's like, well, I'm not normally one to like raise my voice. So this was kind of a big deal for him. And then I remember my husband just absolutely just going, okay, here's who we're going to call. Like, let me help you take care of this. And I remember kind of being a little numb for a little bit of just like, kind of like, okay, what I went into, what needs to happen? Like, we need to get, I remember like sitting on the bed and telling my husband, I was like, okay, don't worry about it. You stay with the kids. I'll fly home. I'll take care of all of this. Right. And just kind of being a little bit more like stoic and going into, how do I fix this? How do I take this on myself? And I remember him saying, no, we'll go together as a family. We're all going, and I was like, but you don't have to face this. I have to face this, So it's a very like instinct was like protect, like hold, I'll take all the burden. I'll take all of it on myself, and I'll make sure that they're not involved in this. And that wasn't, fair for them. That wasn't fair for my daughter, to go through her grief cycle, for even my husband to go through his own grief cycle. And so it was just this, the initial reaction was, okay, got to care for everyone, got to stay strong, got to be, and maybe it was the mama instinct with just having two young kids. Maybe it was being, I have 5 siblings altogether. So I was the second of 5, and so it was a lot of, okay, got to take care of the younger siblings now, got to go help my mom, got to go help my dad, got to go take care of everyone. And so it was just a lot of very numb. It was a lot of, I've got a job to do now. And the singular focus was, I need to get home. I need to take care of the estate. We need to get through the funeral. And it was like, I didn't really allow myself to really think or feel until after. There wasn't a lot of tears like I expected. It was very practical. I was very stoic. I definitely numbed. That was my first response before I allowed myself to feel.
And how long did it take you to feel?
I let myself really work through my grief. I let myself really just sit and experience all of it, probably about a week after we got home from everything. Once all of the like, okay, everything's kind of been settled. Now I'm allowed to be sad about this. Now I'm allowed to be angry about this. Now I'm allowed to, so it was definitely, it was hard. That was a lot. Kind of all at once. I'd just been holding, it's like I was holding my breath. And finally I was like, okay, go, you know?
I know everybody deals with the death differently, and I can't even imagine. And what you went through, it's not fair, and it should not have happened. And I think with the magnitude of siblings' death, or maybe your close one's death to domestic violence, violence itself, there's a lot of questions that you will never get answered. And then you get puzzled in your head, and what, like earlier you were saying, what ifs, and did it affect your sleep? Did it affect your maybe eating or daily life?
I worked really hard so that it wouldn't, because I immediately was like, I need to make sure I have support. I need to make sure I have a good therapist. I need to make sure. And again, the whole thing was, I have babies, I have kids. You know what I mean? I don't want to be checked out. I don't want to numb myself from this. I mean, I did. That's like, I wanted to, but there was the reality of, if I numb myself to this, I'm going to numb myself to joy. I'm going to numb myself to the life that's happening around me now. That's how I felt at the time. So it was this very like, I don't want to say I wouldn't let myself. It was more like, I didn't want to go through what I felt was the way everyone else walks through. And that's not fair. That was such an overgeneralization at the time. But I was like, I didn't lose sleep, but I worked really hard to, if I wasn't feeling tired, if I was feeling emotion, what is it? And identify it and journal and work through it, right? So no, because I worked hard to not get to that state.
What was your brother's dreams, and then what was he like when he was alive?
Yeah, my brother was the funniest person I know, and still one of the funniest people I know. So he's very stubborn. He's very, very smart, and he was so funny. And so Jacob was a very like caring person. So he's the person who would like find the kid who didn't have any friends, and Jacob was like, come on, you're like, he always kind of found the odd kids out and was always friends with them. And so I mean, Jacob struggled with a lot of things, but then he also had he's the person who took care of everybody. And he was funny, and like I remember being really sad and upset once, and he's like, come on, let's go do something together. And he really recognized when other people were upset and hurting. It's like, come on, I'll help cheer you up. His way of cheering you up was by being really funny. Just come on, we're just gonna go, go enjoy something. We're gonna go enjoy life. We're gonna go look at butterflies. We're gonna go find something fun to do. And so he was such a great kid, and I miss him a lot.
Oh. Thank you, Heather, for sharing that. Sounds like a huge loss to our world.
Yeah.
So I really appreciate you sharing this. I just walked at a fashion show with other domestic violence survivors who Love Life Now Foundation, and my friend Barbara Gordon is also a domestic violence survivor, very close to getting killed as well.
Wow.
And then myself as well, I thought I was gonna die when my father was physically abusing me. And luckily in Japan, we don't have much access to guns and weapons, so it was more of beating and kicking and all that. But still, as a child, it's tremendous pain and
Yeah.
not
Wow.
fair. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, anyways, I just want to really appreciate you and your brother telling the story together, and I want to shout out to my fellow models that raised $7,500 the night
That's
that we
amazing.
walked together as a model of Love Life Now Foundation as a domestic violence survivor. And then, Heather, let me tell you, when we walked before that in the backstage, we had this like sense of unspoken empathy and love towards
Mhm.
others, and
Mhm.
with the hairstylist and some of the volunteers backstage for the victim of domestic violence. And some of them lost the family members like you. There
Wow.
were actually 3 men who lost their family members, cousin, mother, aunts,
Wow.
and brothers. We
Wow.
all worked together. So fortunately, this cycle needs to end, and that's what we were trying to do, mention and awareness. And then what was impressive was not only this event, but one of the events that I attended, that all men were encouraged to come in front, and it was called
Mhm.
White People event to pledge against domestic violence, and then saying
Mhm.
that they will never be and never use this domestic violence is a set of sentences that they were echoing together, and that was
Mhm.
very powerful. And then also
Yeah.
it was powerful from the men's perspective to
Right. Right.
experience the domestic violence through our brother's case as well. That a lot of men, one of the survivor of domestic violence from the modeling, uh, the fundraiser, he said, especially men don't speak up about the domestic
Yeah.
violence.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
he's not here with us, but I think through you, he's speaking to us
Yeah.
that this message that whether men or women, that we face this domestic violence and then death, overall, that the soul shines through you, and your message is
Yeah.
very important to us.
Yeah. I like that. Thank you. I appreciate that. I appreciate that a lot. And I think that's it's really important to share the story and share like this is hard. And I remember the first few months after my brother's death, I remember being really like unsure of how to share his story, right? Because I remember thinking, oh, what if this is too much for people? Oh, what if this is too much information? What if I trigger them? What if I activate them? What if it's and I was like, no, I get to share his story. I still get to speak my truth about this, you know. And for some people, it will be too much, and it feels really uncomfortable, but I mean, goodness, if it feels uncomfortable for them, I was like, how do you think it feels for me? How do you think it feels for me walking through this? You know, so it is really important to share our stories. It is really powerful to share our stories and to raise awareness for this and say, okay, how do we get better? How do we get better at this? How do we get better at noticing the signs? How do we get better at caring, honestly, for men's mental health? You know, for women's mental health, of course, obviously, and kids, but also for men. You
Absolutely.
know.
So Heather, let's change our question to the tools that you mentioned. A couple of things, like
Yeah.
going to therapy and then really checking out for your children and stuff. But before you answer the question about the tools that you use to overcome the adversity, I just want to mention that all of our guests on this podcast really truly spoke um, wonderful tools that they use to overcome. And this is one of my favorite part of the show. What happens is a lot of people who never been through this extreme adversity, they just say, okay, just go get a therapist, you'll be fine. And it's not like that. It's an everyday struggle. And
Yeah.
then it is
Yeah.
just unbelievable amount of hoping that we have to go through. So what
Yeah.
is the tools that you think that it worked the best for you in your case of loss of your brother?
Yeah. Oh my gosh, there are so many. And you're so right when you say it's not just I'm just going to go to a therapist once a week and things will be great. No, it was a daily, sometimes hourly. What do I need? What do I need? What do I need? So the first and probably the one of the ones that helped me the most was I had a really good friend at the time, a very, very understanding. She's just the type of woman who just knew how to hold space for you. And she was absolutely someone I, with permission, relied on, right? It was still do you have space to listen to what I have to say right now? Can I go to coffee and cry right now? And she was she was there for me. So I had a really, really, really good friend. I was really able to talk through a lot of things with, who I, was able to really lean on. And my husband was the same way. My husband had experienced a death of his mom when he was really young, so he knew a lot of the same emotions I was feeling. So I was able to really share with him on such an intimate level of, this is how I feel today, like this is what I'm going through today. And he understood just in a way that I just am so, grateful for. So grateful for. Obviously, wish he hadn't lost his mom. But it was, for us, it was really, really, really powerful. So number one for me was those really core people of, I feel so safe trusting you. I feel so safe letting and sharing every part of me and all the feelings that I have. Second was therapy, and I got into therapy right away. I knew that I was going to need to work through tools. I knew I was going to need to ask questions. I knew I was going to need to process through all of this. And I knew I had to take care of myself so I could take care of my family. So therapy was really powerful for me. I did 6 months very specifically of like grief therapy, very specifically of focusing on, how do I hold grief? How do I work through grief? How do I work through all of this? Journaling was a really powerful one for me as well. Anytime there was the moment where I was like, I wish I could tell my brother this, I'd write it out, right? So I'm like, hey, Jacob, guess what happened today? Or anytime I was like, I wish I could call you and ask you about this, I would write it out as if I was writing directly to him. That was really powerful for me. Or anytime, like, remember you were like, did you sleep? Anytime I started to feel my thoughts really building up and getting really worried, I'd sit and write them out before bed. I'd just write anything that was like, what's on my mind? What am I upset about? What am I angry about? What's going through my head? So journaling was really powerful. Those are the main ones. I'm sure there were others. It's hard with grief. Sometimes things can get a little fuzzy, right? You're kind of like, how did I get through that? Those are the ones I really powerfully remember. It was just a lot of, honestly, it was a lot of really understanding and acknowledging my emotions. It was like, oh, I'm getting triggered for no reason. What is, like, why am I mad that the dishwasher wasn't, like, this dish wasn't really clean? I'm like, okay, that's anger. Okay, anger, why are you here? And was really stopping and noticing what emotions are in my body and then saying, okay, anger, you're welcome. You're powerful. It means there was something I really cared about. How do I now work through it? So it was a lot of that. A lot of that.
As you state all these tools, I was trying to write on the comment section, and that people can maybe apply for these things. And I like the journaling part of it, because obviously you can't have an actual conversation with your mother. Then the journaling part of it, I think
Yeah.
that might really actualize, and
Yeah.
then kind of tangible way
Yeah.
that you're talking to him,
Mm-hmm.
but reflecting what's going on, I think it's important.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And how do you identify your emotions like so well? Like, say you mentioned about trigger, and then say dishwashers, and like a lot of us, like, especially for me, when I
Yeah.
was growing up, I never had these resources of mental health, coping
Mm-hmm.
skill,
Mm-hmm.
PTSD,
Yeah.
Did you have those tools prior to your brother's death that you were able to kind of understand or apply?
A little bit. I really think, because the more I talk to people, the more I realize, you know how some people are good writers, some people are great, at soccer, some people are great at, they have so many people have all these different talents. I think one of my talents really is understanding emotions, right? It feels like such a weird talent to have. You know what I mean? I like say it out loud sometimes. I'm like, is that really? But no, I don't. I'm not going to doubt myself about this. But it's always been something I've instinctively understood in other. I've always had such a great empathy and understanding of others. Of, oh, this person's sad. They're not just sad, they're sad because, and then going and taking the steps back of, but why are they sad? What happened to them? And so I just, in just my natural curiosity in my readings, I've read a lot of psychology books just on my own, just because there's been a deep curiosity there, and wanting to know more, and and so it was some of just stuff I'd picked up in books, different books I've read, just through my own life experience. And I mean, we did some of it in therapy, but it was a lot of just knowing that every emotion I hold is important and recognizing it in myself. And so, no, I don't always know which one it is or why, but it was always a stop, notice, breathe, what's really going on here,
And I'm just curious. That is kind of the tools that you're using to apply for yourself. But how about maybe a community awareness aspect about domestic violence, sharing stories? How about those tools?
I really didn't start sharing my brother's story outside of family and friends until a few months ago. There was something that just really was like, okay, it's time. It felt really personal for a long time. And like I said, I really struggled with, and maybe this goes back to just being an empathetic person. I really struggled with, what if this story is too much for other people? What if this is overwhelming for other people? What if I then have to share my story and then comfort them because it was too much? Do you know what I mean? So there was a lot of working through that. A lot of, I remember going to a party once and someone was like, how many siblings do you have? And I was like, well, 4, but one's passed on. And I'm saying what happened and sharing the story and watching them go, oh, and not knowing what to say. And I felt uncomfortable. You know what I mean? And so there was a lot of that for a long time. So I haven't shared a lot of this story. I haven't gone to domestic violence outreaches yet, but I'm starting to now. And I think this is kind of the next step of my grief journey. This is the next step of how do I take this powerful story? How do I take my brother's, what he did, his sacrifice, really, and how do we make sure that we can raise a generation that's aware of it, and so we can all do better,
I agree with you. And thank you so much for sharing that. And so I always tell people that there's 3 stages, I would say: victim, survivor, and advocacy. And people go through these stages. And I think I'm at the advocacy part where I wish book, I have this podcast, space for other people.
Right.
And really the goal is to, like what you said, bring awareness and prevention to our next generations, our children, especially.
Yeah.
That how do we prevent this? How do we give them more lessons and coping skills? That in my case, 3 decades of depression, not understanding, self-doubt, and
Right.
don't know what to do with
Yeah.
this. So I think what you're doing right now coming to my podcast and maybe sharing your story to other platforms, or maybe to, I don't know what's out there in Italy, but maybe domestic violence awareness agencies or something, that really the goal is to not have a victim like a brother. And like what if that we talked about, what if this guy who killed him, what if his mental health was checked early on?
Right.
He was growing up. What did we fail? What did the school system fail?
Right.
For him to trigger to kill somebody that he doesn't really know. Like, did it get A to Z? That in an intervention as a society, how were we able to help him so that he didn't have to kill your brother? And those are the big questions that we have, and we can be the change for our next generations.
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree with you. And there is the wonder of, what if this guy had a friend who was like, whoa, this is things you're saying are not okay. Hey, let's take you somewhere where you can get some extra help or some extra support. What if the school system had caught on early, like, hey, this guy struggles with this and this and this, and he was able to get support. What if his parents had been like, and taken him to therapy? You wonder all of these things, and you think, okay, great. Now, for our children, how do we begin to have these conversations? How do we begin to catch some of this, and just where do we start? How do we make this normal? It's normal to go to therapy. It's normal to ask for help. It's normal for a friend to say, hey, that's not okay, and call out some behaviors.
So Heather, I'm a journalist, as I mentioned, and recently I wrote an article about mental health, and then the mental health professionals came to our public school, high school parents, got kind of professionally trained of how to identify the mental health issues in like high school. And some parents I wanted to deny it to answer for the newspaper because there's stigma, and there's like so much that we still have to work hard as a parent, as a mom, and like you said, the conversation that we should have with our younger children. And I truly believe that this, as a whole, if we work really hard, we can prevent. And really, your brother's life, as funny and as caring as he is, didn't have to be lost in this way. So, I really appreciate you sharing these tools, and I would definitely share this podcast with some of the survivor of domestic violence that I've known personally. And I really appreciate you being brave and being vulnerable with us.
Yeah, of course. And I think it starts there. I think it starts with all of us being vulnerable, right? Of like, this is how, and finding the right people, of course. We can't always share our story with everyone, but it's just starting that conversation of, this doesn't feel good. I don't feel good. Things don't feel right. And then where do I go, right? It starts with us being vulnerable. It starts with us admitting that things are hard. It starts with us saying, okay, things don't feel right. Where do I go now? It starts with us sharing.
Absolutely. And I want to share something personally with you and with the audience as well. So I was a piano player for Joe Kennedy III. So this is when he was running for the state senate for the first time in Massachusetts. And he's moving the ladder in political ranks. But he had said something that's so impactful during his speech between when I had to play piano. he said, as a Kennedy brand and family, that I had this privileges growing up. That when I did the Peace Corps in Dominican Republic, I met somebody who's same age as me. And he would never catch up to the knowledge and privilege that I had in my life.
Mm-hmm.
Now, thinking about that, the reason why he's running for the politics is because he believes with the knowledge and brand and privileges that he had, that not only I can make a change within you, but the systematic change that I can make an impactful ways to improve our next generation, the generation. And I believe that.
I do too. Yeah.
And I had you and I are not politicians, and we're like moms, and
No.
but
Yeah.
being an advocate and then being a podcaster and then journalist, filmmaker, TV,
Mm-hmm.
I truly believe storytelling can have elements of making an impact on somebody's lives.
I
And
agree.
advocating your brother's story here maybe can reach out to some politicians and then maybe some people who are powerful that
Mm-hmm.
knows how to change the system, like what we mentioned about mental health check at the school system.
Yeah.
Early on, how do you catch that? How do you catch
Yeah.
these signs of
Mm-hmm.
people who don't kill people? Like
Right.
how can we like help them?
Well, yeah. And I think, like, for me, most important is like, man, what was going on in that young man's brain that things felt so hard, that things felt so heavy, that he felt like this was what he was supposed to do. You know what I mean? There's just this, what if he was really suffering a lot too? And there's that side of the like, what if we can just help so many more people just feel better? What if we can just begin and what if we just start young and start saying it's okay to talk about these things? I think about that a lot as well, of like, what if we had caught this young in this man? How much happier would he have been? You know, what if he had such a better life because people had reached out on his behalf? You know, I think about that a lot.
Well, Heather, thank you so much. So let's move on to the last question, which is a gift that came from the adversity. So how would you share with our audience a gift that came from this adversity?
Yeah. What a great question. I think it's just and I think anyone who's been through really tough times in their life will talk about the gift of understanding how wonderful and how fragile life is at the same time. Um, just the beauty in the small moments, because when I think about my brother, I love the small moments we had together. You know, those are the ones that I miss. The text messages, the eating breakfast together. It's these small little things that we do daily that we take for granted. And because I lost my brother, it's like this, like, oh, I love having breakfast with my kids. Oh, I love my walks in nature and looking around. And it's like I was over here, and like so busy with all the things I had to do. And his death brought me here, where it's just very like, whoa, life is incredible and it's amazing and it's fragile and it's wonderful. And I'm so lucky that I'm here, and I'm so lucky I'm going to soak up every moment.
Thank you so much, Heather. Last request for you.
Yeah.
What if someone is going through the same adversity as you? What do you think your biggest advice can be?
I think it can be so uncomfortable to start to share your story, right? You can feel like, maybe you feel like I do, where it's like, what if this person feels uncomfortable when I share? What if they don't know what to say? And you're so worried sometimes about sharing with other people that you hold things in. I would say, go find people who are willing to hold space for you. Go find the people who are willing to sit by you, even though they don't know what to say. They're willing to just sit next to you, right? And go find those people and begin to talk and work through And even if it's messy, and even if it's not good, and even if you don't know why, start sharing. Start saying what's on your mind, and just find those really, really good people. And it's okay that it's uncomfortable. It's okay that you don't know where to start. Just start. That I would say.
Well, thank you again.
Yeah.
This was very meaningful conversation, and all of my podcast guests so far have been very meaningful. This
Yeah.
week at home, and I'm sorry again for your brother's loss. And Jacob or Jake? Is that Jacob?
He went by Jacob, but I think mostly I know him more as like Jake. You know, like he's very, very a little more casual. You know what I mean? Like sometimes it's like Jacob when he was like being ornery, but it's like Jake. It was really what we all called him.
So as I close this podcast today, I want to say thank you to Jake and you, Heather, that sharing the story together. And then through you, I got to learn about his personality and his caring character. And deeply sorry for the loss. And we are going to carry his legacy. And then, as at least moms, in us, even that in our power to make sure this will never happen to anybody. And we'll make sure we check in our mental health as well. And we sustain our well being as a mom and as a person so we can continue sharing our stories.
Yeah. Thank you so much for having me, and thank you for giving this space where people can share and we can begin to explore and talk about this and normalize it. So thank you for your podcast. Really, really, I love it so much.
Thank you, Heather. And thank you for our audience. We have a lot more guests coming in. I'm very appreciative. And we continue to have these dialogues. Have a wonderful day.